السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا بكم في برنامج نيوكاسل مع وليد، حلقة خاصة اليوم بمناسبة ذكرى صفقة شراء نيوكاسل مع الصحفي المتميز أوليفر من الاثلتيك. الاثلتيك طبعا صحيفة الاثلتيك شفتوا أنتم كله، ديفيد أرنستين، كريس وولف، جورج كالكن، أوليفر كلهم في الاثلتيك. طبعا الجريدة الأولى في بريطانيا بالنسبة للأخبار الرياضية، جريدة موثوقة دائما أخبارها متميزة. طبعا اشتراكها يعني جدا يعني مبلغ رمزي، لكن اللي يبغى آخر الأخبار، وأنا صراحة أكون صادق معكم أعتمد عليها كثير في الأخبار، في عندي في القناة وفي حسابنا في تويتر. وطبعا هذا اللي شرف اليوم أول مرة استضيف أحد من الأثلتيك. First, welcome lads and lasses to Newcastle وليد. We have Oliver from the Athletic. I'm honored as a first time I have a journalist from the Athletic. Welcome, Oliver.
Thank you. Nice to be on the show, and nice to see you again after we met in Riyadh recently. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you, and it was a nice time. Of course, it wasn't a nice result for Newcastle fans, but for your team, Liverpool was great. But Oliver, you write a great piece. I read it this morning in the Athletic. You come to Riyadh especially to write this article. We'll come to the article. We'll talk about the article later on in this show. I noticed all of the journalists, all the newspaper, they write about the takeover. They some publish, some of them didn't publish it yet. But I believe, if not all, they write it from a distance. They didn't came to make this trouble, make it difficult and come to to travel to another country like what you do. So I'm wondering, and the fans wondering, why do you need to come to Saudi Arabia to write this, or what you can tell us about your work trip for this article?
Okay, well, thank you. I will happily try to explain. When we were talking about it was coming up to the first anniversary of the takeover. Obviously, it was in October, and we were talking about what articles we could do. And George Calkin and Chris Wolf had worked on this big, long, very, very detailed, very insightful article on what has changed at Newcastle and what's happened. The story, the untold story, really, of the last 12 months. And one of my editors was talking and saying, well, it's really interesting to do this, and we should do this, but with the Athletic, we do things bigger and we think better than everybody else. We need to do something else, something different. Why don't we tell the story from the Saudi point of view? Why don't we send one of our writers to Saudi Arabia and they can sort of have a look round and speak to people and try to get a sense of how this takeover is regarded in Saudi Arabia, because I think there's been a lot of discussion in the UK about what different opinions a range of people have, whether it's very positive, very negative, somewhere in between, about the impact of Saudi investment in Newcastle, in English football. And I think what we realised we didn't have is that perspective and insight of what Saudi people felt and how it was regarded, but also even what the Saudi government think of it, what the Saudi FA or Saudi Football Federation think of it. So I went to I was given the task of flying to Riyadh at the end of August. Lots of difficulties with visa, with flights, with with trying to line up interviews, trying to arrange anything. I thought the trip wasn't going to happen, but I got there. I saw you, I think, the next day. It was really interesting, the whole experience, really. I mean, it's given me, definitely a different insight about the takeover and about Saudi Arabia. I'd never visited before, so it's I think it was a really worthwhile exercise for me, and hopefully a really interesting read for our subscribers.
طبعا أوليفر يعني ملخص اللي قاله، طبعا صعب أترجم كل الكلام اللي قاله. يعني يقول لك أنا رحت للرياض علشان أكتب مقالة مميزة مختلفة عن أنه مجرد، يعني في صحفيين كثير كتبوا عن صفقة الاستحواذ من مساء، يعني من انجلترا قاعد يكتبوا من نيوكاسل. لكن أوليفر يعني قال أنا بجي للسعودية، مهمتي إني أجي للسعودية وأكتب مقالة خاصة، لأن صفقة استحواذ نيوكاسل شيء مهم في بريطانيا، في الكرة البريطانية. فأنا أبغى أسافر خصوصا عشان أكتب هذه المقالة. ومقالة ممتازة الصراحة، موجودة في حسابنا، نشرناها في حسابنا في تويتر، موجودة في الاثلتيك. Is it your first time you visit Saudi, Oliver?
Yes, yeah. I've been to the Middle East previously. I've been to the UAE. I've been to Qatar. I've been to Lebanon in the past year as well. But yeah, I hadn't been to Saudi Arabia. I was due to go there in, I think, 2008 or 2009 when Manchester United were playing a game there. I think it was a testimonial game for Sami Al-Jaber. But
you attend this one?
I was meant to be going to that, and there was some issue with my passport, and my colleague had to go instead. So I should have been whatever it was 12, 13 years ago. But no, this was my first time, and I think it's changed quite a lot in that time, hasn't it? Not just socially, but architecturally as well.
I was there at the game, and in 2008, Sami Jabal Memorial, and I remember it was 2008, and I was in college back then. Yeah. But okay, this is first time you come to Riyadh. How you learn word استراحة?
Yeah.
The article you read استراحة.
I met up with. Let me think. I arrived on the Monday or Tuesday. I arrived on the Tuesday morning overnight, and I met up with somebody who lives in Riyadh, who's a football fan. It's not somebody mentioned in the article. Works in football, so it's not somebody I mentioned in the article. But we went out for something to eat, and he said, "What do you want to do now?" And I said, "Well, look, I would like to go somewhere where I could watch some football. Watch the Premier League matches that were on that night, which was Southampton against Chelsea and Leeds against Everton. So this was 30th of August." And I said, I just want to know how people in Riyadh watch football. You don't go to pubs. What do you do? And he said, I'll show you. And he took me to this place, and I've no idea whereabouts in the city it was. I could, because he was driving me, and I've no idea whether we were north, south, east, west, far off in halfway to Jeddah. I don't know. And he so we went there, and he and his friends were talking and offering me tea, offering me shisha. And they were just talking, and he was explaining that the culture is that so often groups of friends have these places where somebody will rent, and it will just be somewhere they can go in the evening just to hang out. And I thought it seemed like a very good idea.
This is explaining it very well. استراحة, it was really just to get my attention when I read the article this morning. I have a friend asked me today, he's a Hilal fan, but he said, why Al Hilal? Why Oliver came to Al Hilal specifically? He's happy though, but he went to tease the other club's fans.
Yeah, to be honest, it wasn't quite like that. I wanted to be in Riyadh when Newcastle were playing, and I wanted it to be a big game, which I knew I would be able to watch, a big Premier League game, which I knew I'd be able to watch on TV. So we were looking at whether I would be there when they played Manchester City in the end of August, or whether I might go to coincide with the Liverpool game a few days later. And I think when I looked at the calendar, I thought the Liverpool game worked well because there was also the chance to go to an Al Hilal match that same evening. But because of the kickoff time, and because my priority was sort of the thing about Newcastle, I wasn't able to watch the full game at Al Hilal. So it was Al Hilal versus Al Fayha, and it was 0-0 at half time. And I thought, wow, Al Hilal struggling. I wasn't expecting this, but they won 2-0. We were in the bar in Big B Cafe in Riyadh, and we heard the roar from the other side of the room, which told us that.
So it wasn't because Al Hilal was the title winner and the Champions League of Asia. No, just a coincidence.
Well, I mean, it probably sealed the deal. If that expression, you know that expression. It's easier to watch. It's easier to say, oh, I'll go and watch Al Hilal than one of the smaller clubs. I mean, I know Al Ittihad, very, very big club in Saudi Arabia, very big club in Asia. Al Nassr, very, very big club. But Al Hilal are the champions of Saudi Arabia, the champions of Asia. They are the biggest club. They're what Newcastle want to be in the Premier League, aren't they? So it's
of course. Of course.
That's Al Hilal. It was a good experience, but a lot of people told me that it's a shame you're coming to this match. It would be great if you could come to the derby match against Al Ittihad, because that's so much more.
Al Ittihad and Al Nassr both are good games. Oliver, how you find Riyadh and what you expect to see or find in Riyadh and you didn't?
I think having been to other cities in the Middle East, I think I probably had some perception of what it might look like in terms of the skyscrapers in some areas and incredibly modern sort of the malls. I can't remember what was the name of them, the sort of shopping mall I went to. What would that be called with all the kind of e-gaming, esports areas? I can't remember what the place I went to was. But in these areas, it's much more modern than, if you go to if you go to a shopping centre in Manchester, the Trafford Centre in Manchester, it was built in the 90s. The Metro Centre in Newcastle, built in the 90s. Liverpool One in Liverpool is built in the maybe last 10 years. But you go somewhere like Riyadh or Dubai or Doha, and there are these sort of places which are, I don't know, it feels like you're in the future. And this is quite kind of difficult to comprehend when you're in a place which you're led to believe is sort of living in the 19th century. That's quite often the perception that people have of parts of the Middle East. In certain regards, it's people would talk about life in the Middle East being very sort of unchanged in some ways from old times. But if you go into the big cities, there are things that are not only modern, they seem by British standards to be futuristic. So it's there's that kind of contradiction. And I went to the edge of the world on my final afternoon in Riyadh, and it was one of the you know where I mean, the edge of the world. I don't know the name of it in
Arabic.
In Arabic, but
حافة العالم or نهاية العالم.
Yeah,
edge of the world.
It's one of the most incredible places I've ever seen anywhere in the world. That was an incredible place, and I visited the place just to the west of the city, which is like a heritage. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remind myself the name. I'm terrible. Diriyah?
Yeah.
I went there also. Sorry, I was just trying to look it up. Diriyah.
Al Diriyah is the old Riyadh.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
So I imagine there would be
old city
sort
in
of
Riyadh.
old city within the city, but there doesn't really seem to be that within sort of the main conurbation of Riyadh. It's outside. So that was I found that interesting, surprising, I suppose. I kept saying, no, what, I want to see the old Riyadh. What? And people
Yeah,
said,
actually,
you need to go over there. Yeah.
Yeah, Al Diriyah was old city before Riyadh exist.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but after that, it's become inside Riyadh somehow.
Yeah. And the other thing is and this didn't surprise me because so many people had told me this in advance. People said, whatever perceptions you have of Saudi Arabia, the people are so friendly, and that was definitely the case. You were incredibly friendly, and you drove you drove me around. You dropped me back at my hotel, and
That's first.
entertained me.
That's nothing.
But no, and other people there were very, very friendly. I think we always think we always sort of have not we but people have perceptions of where is a friendly, hospitable place to go, and are the people going to be friendly? And I think there are certain difficulties as a journalist visiting Riyadh because you don't have the same sort of media access, same free media that we have in the UK. But it's but yeah, I thought the people were really friendly, and yes, the place, the edge of the world was. I have some amazing pictures which I can't wait to put on Instagram. I've been waiting for 1 month to put these pictures on Instagram just because it was so spectacular.
Yeah, please share some if you can in Twitter so we can watch it and share it.
I will do.
Before we going, Oliver, to main topic, which is the anniversary of Takeover, I found this when I was preparing my show. You write some interesting books here, Oliver. What you can tell us about this one? Actually, got my attention. Forever Young. I saw Manchester City and Liverpool, your team. I don't know what is the picture. Yeah, I think I lost it here. But and also with Liverpool. But this one, Young Forever. What you can tell us about it?
Yeah, the books, the Liverpool book and the Manchester City book were books of articles which we wrote, reflecting the title-winning seasons of those clubs. So it's compilations of articles from the Athletic. So that wasn't really sort of writing a book, as a separate project. But this one you mentioned, Forever Young. That was the first book I wrote. It's about as it says, it's the story of Adrian Doherty, football's lost genius. The boy you see on the front page there. He doesn't look like a footballer. He looks like a kind of ordinary boy. But he was an ordinary boy with extraordinary talent, and he was on the same youth team at Manchester United as Ryan Giggs. Giggs on the left wing, Adrian Doherty on the right wing, and everybody tells me that either Giggs and Doherty were equal talent, or maybe that Giggs was here, and Doherty was there, because he was that good. He was incredibly talented. Nobody had really heard of him before because he got injured at a very early age, serious knee injury, and he wasn't able to resume his football career, and sadly he died at a very young age. But it's a very tragic story, but it's also a story of somebody who, although he was an incredibly talented footballer, he was just a very different kind of person, because he didn't really like football. He liked football, but he wasn't sort of particularly driven to be a world-class footballer. He had incredible talent, but he loved playing music. He would go playing music rather than playing football on a Saturday afternoon as a Manchester United footballer. He would give away his tickets. He would go writing poetry, and he was just a very different character, really fascinating character. He was into philosophy, poetry. He had read the Quran when he was 17, despite being a Catholic boy from Ireland. So he was, incredibly interesting story, human story. I think. I don't know whether it's possible to buy that book on Amazon or on Noon or anything like this, but
Of course, of course.
If anybody would like to, it's I'm sure you would find the story interesting. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that, to sell my book as well as my journalism.
It's interesting, and I wish to read it soon. Okay, speaking of the article, we didn't want to expose the content. We want people, you should read it if you want more information about your trip in Saudi Arabia, and speaking about the takeover inside Saudi Arabia. At the beginning of the article, you mentioned the height of PIF. So did you went there? I misunderstand. Did you went the top or no?
Oh no! I didn't go to the top. No, I didn't go to the top. I took a taxi there, and I sort of stood next to it and looked at it and
okay.
I thought looked at
the
building and so it was.
It's an amazing area over there.
Yeah, the financial district. It's got all these spectacular buildings and it's a very architecturally it's a very impressive building. It looks from a distance it just looks like a big. Sorry, it just looks like a big
next together.
But then you go up close and then you read about it. And it's about it's about inspired by the crystals from the desert, and it's I thought it was a really interesting design. I like some skyscrapers. I like that skyscraper, and I thought it was very interesting. But it also felt like I was standing there looking at the PIF tower and thinking, well, I'm not going to get any answers here because nobody from PIF will talk to me. But it was interesting just getting perceptions of you and of other fans and of Hervé Renard and Yasser Al Nissahal, from the Saudi Football Federation. And,
so you have a conversation with them?
Yes, yeah. So
and in the article,
yes. And
so what you want to tell the readers for this article? It's this article, what it contains, if you want, in your own words, what you want to see about this article to the readers.
Yeah, well, I imagine. I mean, I guess a lot of your subscribers and people watching will be Newcastle supporters, and it's talking about the growing Newcastle fan base in Saudi Arabia. It's talking. I spoke to you in the article. I spoke to a guy called Abdurman Katani, who, like you, is a Newcastle fan, but he sort of openly says, "Well, I didn't have a team until the takeover happened, but once the takeover happened, he suddenly felt, wow, I have a club. Saudi Arabia has a club in the Premier League, and this is my team." And he's been over to, like you, he's been over to Newcastle 2 or 3 times, and he's now completely obsessed 1 year later. And I think that's really interesting. I think it's interesting speaking to Joali, the Liverpool, the guy from the Liverpool Supporters Club that you introduced me to, and he was talking about how
Jalawi Al-Abdan,
he was talking about how generally you have Real Madrid are very popular in Saudi Arabia, Barcelona, PSG, Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City increasingly because of the Arab ownership there, but Newcastle are kind of going up. And he said, you could see a situation where everybody where if Newcastle becomes successful, then he thinks everybody will get behind that, even if it's a Liverpool fan. He thinks like all Saudi football fans, or most Saudi football fans, would be enthused by a successful Saudi-owned club in the Premier League. And it just made me think really that I think we've probably in England, we probably look at this as quite similar to the Qatar takeover of Manchester City and the Qatar takeover of PSG and the Abu Dhabi takeover of Manchester City, but it's totally different because unlike Qatar, unlike Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia has a huge population, and it's a country with a big football heritage and a really kind of engaged football fan base. And that was really interesting, just how, like, when we were in the cafe watching the Liverpool game, everybody was on FPL. Everybody was, I could see people checking their FPL teams at halftime. People talk about being on football Twitter, being on, and it's the same in England, but it felt like even more so, even more engaged socially. I spoke to somebody at Newcastle who told me that Saudi Arabia is now the third biggest territory for them in terms of social media and traffic to their website. It's England, or it's UK, then US, and then it's Saudi Arabia, which was obviously not the case pre-takeover. So it showed me that there is a big and probably very marketable football fan base in Saudi Arabia. So where you see Manchester City doing a sponsorship deal with, for example, a Middle Eastern, look, Etihad Airways, that's different, but some of the Abu Dhabi-based companies they've done sponsorship deals with, you think, well, is there really a mutual benefit there? Whereas you think, if somebody sponsors Newcastle, and if it's noon.com or something like that, there's real potential there for that to work very well for Newcastle, work very well for the company as well, because it's so I think that's another thing that really struck me. And also it was just interesting I spoke to Adwa Al Arif, who's the deputy sports minister, or one of the deputy sports ministers, and she was explaining to me just the sort of the Saudi national sports strategy, which I think is something that hadn't really had much coverage in the UK media or the Western media, and I found it really interesting about more participation and the health benefits of participation, getting women more involved in playing sport. I think it'd gone from only 7% of females actively played sport to, I think it's now 20%, and that's expected to go up and up. So I was keen to reflect, that there are a lot of things that, there are a lot of other questions which you'll be aware of regarding the Newcastle takeover and sports washing, and I asked those questions of different people. But I think it's also important to tell the story of the ways in which Saudi Arabia is modernizing, and the ways that perhaps fits into a wider story of creating and developing the sports culture within Saudi Arabia.
طبعا كنت أقول أوليفر أن المقالة اللي كتبها شملت أو إيش يبغى يتكلم عنه أو يقول للمتابعين والقراء. تكلم طبعا عن نادي الهلال، تكلم مباراة حضرها مع الفيحاء، تكلم مع الأستاذ ياسر المسحل، مع هيرفي رينارد مدرب المنتخب، أبو العريفي من وزارة الرياضة والفرق النسائية، تكلم عن المنتخب السعودي النسائي الجديد والرياضة النسائية. مقالة صراحة شاملة، أمور كثيرة تكلم عنها أوليفر. Oliver, regarding His Excellency Mr. Yasser Al Rumayyan, have not saying shock everyone because we know that already that he will have interview, but it was an early morning. In this particular podcast, Yasser Al Rumayyan named 4 reasons of buying Newcastle. Why they choose Newcastle? 4 reasons. Speaking of, first he explained why Premier League, because it's Premier League is number 1. league in the world. Every team can beat any team. And also, he said 1 million fan behind the team, one team city. So that's one of the reason. And also talking about financial matter regarding 350 as a whole club 100%, and his potential to go at least 3.5 billion, which was much better idea to the PIF and to him from taking 30% of a UK club, which was costing 700 million. What's your take on that? And please, if you can say what is that name of the team, because we have arguing here which the team was.
Well, we at the Athletic, we made a number of inquiries, and it was suggested to us by a very good source that might have been Manchester United, the club in question, but I don't know that 100%.
Not Tottenham.
I don't know. It's possible that it was Tottenham, but I don't know. It was certainly one source suggested Manchester United to us. It was interesting because he was talking about it purely as, I mean, he's from the Public Investment Fund. He's their whole purpose is to invest, and it's not about sort of glory. It's not about, he didn't mention the idea of winning, sort of being successful. He talked about purely as an investment. I thought that was very honest.
But that was the question is about financial. Why pick Newcastle?
Oh, I think one reason is because Newcastle is it's a big club which has been fairly poorly run for the last sort of 15 years. You know, Mike Ashley bought the club. He sold it at a profit, but the club didn't really grow. You know, commercially it didn't grow. Economically it didn't grow. On the pitch it certainly didn't grow. It's been a club. I think everybody can see the potential with Newcastle in the same way you can see the potential with Everton or certain other clubs. But Newcastle is, because we took Chelsea was sold in the summer for nearly 10 times as much as Newcastle, and that's because Chelsea have been. Chelsea are based in London for one thing, and that's significant. But Chelsea are, if you go back to 2003, I think most people would have said Newcastle were a better team than Chelsea when Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea, and I think Newcastle had been in the Champions League that season, or maybe the season before. So it was
2001, 2002.
Yeah, so. Those two clubs were at a very similar level in terms of on-pitch performance. And over the last 19 years, Chelsea have gone like this and won 5 Premier League titles, 2 Champions Leagues. Newcastle have won nothing. They've kind of gone down, up, but they've not become a big force in the Premier League. But everyone can see the stadium, as he said, the fact that basically everyone in the whole city supports Newcastle. It's a very rare thing, to be a big city with only one club, and it's the potential is enormous. There's a great tradition. They've got a big fan base, and it's also. I also wonder whether, and he didn't talk about this, but a number of people have mentioned to me that there may be different advantages of investing in Newcastle, which would, because of its value as a port, as a sort of maritime port, and in terms of the wind energy off the northeast coast, people say these might also be things that will appeal to the PIF, but I think above all, it's it's just a really good investment. I think if you buy Newcastle and you make it successful, then it's immediately worth. It very quickly be worth 3 times as much. It could ultimately, as he says, be worth 8, 9, 10 times as much. But I think it's very important that they break into the European elite clubs in order to do that. And I think that's going to take time. I don't just mean qualifying for the Champions League once. I mean qualifying for the Champions League again and again and again, and becoming part of that sort of inner circle of very rich, very powerful clubs, which I find quite terrifying. But yeah, it's if Newcastle want to achieve their, or PIF want to achieve their ambitions with Newcastle, they will want to do that, I'm sure.
Brilliant, Oliver. A couple of questions regarding Premier League. Now Arsenal, do you think Arsenal can hold up on the top, or still early, at least before the World Cup?
I think Arsenal have been really, really impressive so far. Very impressive. And it's not just been the results, it's been the performances as well. It's really, they're a team that have made a big, big improvement from last season, and particularly from the season before. I think when you see that sort of year-on-year improvement that they've made under Mikel Arteta from a very poor position 2 years ago, I think it's really impressive. I think the problem they face, and it's a problem that Liverpool kept facing under Jurgen Klopp, because obviously they won the Premier League title in 2020, but it's the only one they won, despite finishing with, I think it was 92 points last season, 97 points another season, 98 points. It's so hard to beat this Manchester City team to the Premier League title. So although Arsenal have had this incredible start, they're only 1 point ahead of Manchester City. And I think most people would agree with me and say that they would expect Manchester City to win the Premier League. I think if people like me say that Arsenal have a chance, and it's, you know, maybe that's a 10% chance, 20% chance, maybe 30% chance. That's to me, that's very optimistic compared to what I would have said at the start of the season, when I thought Arsenal would be challenging for top 4. I'm really impressed by them, but I think ultimately Manchester City will probably have too much.
Arsenal, they reach good level, but they can't keep it so long. And first test against Manchester United, they lost. So I think they are Manchester United beating by Manchester City. So I think, of course, you're right. I believe you are right. City will have it this season.
But I would also say of that one game that they lost, you know, it's the only game which they haven't won. Arsenal, they played really well for 60 minutes, and they were unfortunate to go 2-1 down, and then I think they gambled a little bit to try to win the game. And you know, it can go either way when you gamble. And it was, I thought they were unlucky in that game. I think if they'd drawn or won that game, I think people would have said it was a fair result. But it's so I think they've been very impressive. And if I say I don't think they will win the league, but they might challenge for it, then that's a compliment. That's a compliment.
What about Liverpool? They sell Mane, they increase salary of Mohamed Salah, they bring Darwin Núñez with high. Everybody was shocked to bring Núñez with this money, and when they needed a midfield, and almost club was begging for a midfield, they bring him Arthur from the injured family. So what do you think going on? What do you think they're lucky?
I mean, you can look at their results in the first few weeks of the season, and they've been really disappointing. But I think the performances have been even more alarming. They've you know, the performance in Naples against Napoli in the Champions League was terrible. The performance for the first half at Manchester United was terrible. The performance of the first half against Brighton the other day was terrible. And this is a team which, over the previous 4 seasons, has only, it's only had, a handful of bad performances. They've only lost, I think they only lost 15 games in the previous 4 seasons in the Premier League. And 8 of those games were in a very short period in 2021 when they had a lot of defensive problems, injuries. So apart from that one period in 2021, they've played so well, at this kind of level for 4 years. And right now they're like down here. They look like a poor team, short on fitness, confidence, not playing well. They look, they just look like a kind of messy, scrappy team. And even the game we watched, the game where they beat Newcastle, they could have been 2-0 down, couldn't they? Isaac had the goal disallowed, and then they Liverpool equalised. Then he scored in the last minute, or last kick of the game, and that's one of only 2 games they've won in the Premier League. So they really need to sort themselves out, because I think the level for qualifying for the top 4, qualifying for the Champions League this season, looks high to me. I think Tottenham and Arsenal both look a lot better than last season. Manchester City, obviously. Chelsea, under a new manager, Graham Potter, I think look competitive. They go through some changes, but everybody would expect them to get a lot of points. Manchester United look better than last season, not dramatically better, but I think better. And then Newcastle
too.
Yeah, I think they will challenge for European football. Whether top 4 Champions League might be difficult, but
difficult. Yeah, European seat we really. I see. I talk with my friends in Newcastle. A lot of them, they prefer going to Wembley for final, much more have a European seat.
Well, I remember having this conversation with Manchester City fans about 12 years ago when they first started to become a force after their takeover in 2008, and there was a lot of talk: can they get into the Champions League? Can they get top 4? And yeah, like you're saying, they just wanted to win a trophy and go to Wembley and win a trophy, because it had been, for them, it had been since 1968. No, not 1968 since they'd won the league, but I think 1975, 76 since they won a trophy. So it was 35 years, and
you mean City, Manchester City.
This was Manchester City in before they won the FA Cup in 2011. So, one of my best friends, a Manchester City fan, he had never seen them win a trophy, and he says that going to Wembley, beating Manchester United in the semi-final, and then beating Stoke in the final was incredible, absolutely incredible. And then they got into the Champions League, and that was incredible. And then they won the Premier League with the last kick of the season, and that was incredible as well, because that was one of the most incredible things anybody has ever seen in the Premier League. And I think with Newcastle, I mean, it's been even longer since they won a trophy. It's over 50 years, and it's even I'm not old enough to have seen Newcastle win a trophy. So I'm sure Newcastle would really love to be in the Champions League, or even the Europa League, or even the Europa Conference League. But to win the FA Cup or to win the Carabao Cup would be an incredible sort of first step on that road. Yeah. I would love to see Newcastle. I would love to see Newcastle win a trophy.
Last cup was 1969. The first club which I think is the Europa League, I believe.
Yeah. It's the Fairs Cup, as it was called then, and it's So even my big brother is not old enough to have seen Newcastle win a trophy. It's
hopefully this will change soon.
Yeah, but I mean, when that happens, you see, having seen the celebrations when Manchester City won their first trophy in, what was it, 35 years, and their first league title in 44 years.
My wish,
spectacular.
My wish, if that opportunity happen, I wish if I'm in Newcastle at the time.
Oh, it would be amazing. It would be. I hope I'm in Newcastle at that time. I think it would be one of the great
moment.
Experiences in football.
Exactly.
Really amazing.
Oliver, speaking of popularity of Newcastle in Riyadh and Saudi Arabia, here is Mr. Neil Crompton, the ambassador of Great UK, said, it was great to meet legend of Premier League, legend Anthony Ferdinand. I think believer Rio Ferdinand. It was cool. He's in Riyadh now. Maybe he will coaching Al Shabab, Al Club, Saudi Shabab Al Club, and maybe because I'm posting this, half of my followers who supporting Newcastle will be unfollow me, or I will lose them. And ironically, the club Al Shabab they were like Newcastle.
yeah. It's no, it's an interesting one. Anton Ferdinand, you'll be aware he's the younger brother of Rio Ferdinand. So he was he retired quite recently. I think he was he played for West Ham and Sunderland, QPR. He played in Turkey. I think maybe calling him a legend of the Premier League would be maybe a bit of a stretch. Rio Ferdinand,
that's
legend.
Maybe teasing Newcastle fans.
Les Ferdinand, legend. Anton Ferdinand, good defender for West Ham and Sunderland and Queen's Park Rangers.
But, maybe that was of course a compliment.
It's nice. It's nice if you get a job with Al Shabab. It's I'm just seeing a comment coming up. Somebody saying, I was there when we nearly won the cup in the 70s. The whole city turned out to watch the lads come home. Cannot imagine what it will be like when we win. That he would be talking about 1974 when Newcastle.
Yeah, Liverpool.
They got to the FA Cup final and they were beaten. But it's it was I agree with. I think it was Len when Newcastle win a trophy. And who knows? Maybe it's this year, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. I think it'd be much sooner than 5 years. When that happens, that will be an incredible moment. Because I think things when you haven't had success for a long time, that's when it means so much more. And Newcastle, obviously, their supporters are desperate for a trophy, and it's it will happen. It will happen. It looked like under Mike Ashley's ownership, it looked like it would never happen, but exactly. I'm sure now it will happen. Whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, I don't know. I would say within the next 2 or 3 years.
I host Keith Patterson. He's a big popular Newcastle fan, and he helped with the takeover process. I asked him, what's the most thing get your attention of the takeover of Newcastle? He said, the most thing is that we have hope again of winning the silverware. And this is backing what you said about Mike Ashley. With Mike Ashley, nobody can think that Newcastle will win something. Oliver K from Athletic, thank you.
It's a real pleasure. It's very nice to speak to you.
كان معنا أوليفر كي من صحيفة الاثلتيك. طبعا مقالة خاصة جاء كتبها هنا في السعودية عن صفقة الاستحواذ. نأمل إن شاء الله أنكم تحوز على إعجابكم. طبعا هذه الحلقة طبعا من المقالة اللي كتبها أوليفر. شكرا لكم للمتابعة، ونراكم إن شاء الله في حلقة جديدة من نيوكاسل مع وليد. Thank you for watching.